yisroel.com.
It's a great kavod to be here in this beautiful Bet HaKnesset and to share with you some thoughts about Reb Chaim, our Reb Chaim of our generation. First, I want to point out to you the greatness of Reb Chaim's Torah study, of his scholarship. We say that Gedolei Yisrael, who can judge, who can compare? I want to give you an example or two that just blow the mind totally. He has a Sefer Tamad Dikra, which is on Chumash, which is on Parshiot, which was published 40 or 50 years ago when he was a young man. Look there in Parsha Kiseitzei, which has the Parsha of Gittin. He writes that someone told him in the name of the Gra that the word get is not a word that's Hebrew in the Chumash. It's a word that we use for a divorce. Someone told Reb Chaim that the Gra says that the Gimel and Tes, those two letters, never appear together in any word in the 24 books of Tanakh. And they asked Reb Chaim if it's true. It blows the mind. Reb Chaim says he thought about it. They never come together. Not a Gimel and not a Tes, and then not a Tes and not a Gimel, never together. And then he writes, when he thought about it, there are another 4 combinations of letters that never come together. And he writes what they are. He says, I don't know why. It's hard to imagine how a human being can be such a master of Torah that he can know which letters never come together in all 24 books of Tanakh. If you ask me, just one page of Tanakh, which letters come together, I don't know. And then in parentheses he writes, all the other letters, and mind you, there are 484 combinations, 22 squared. Says all the other letters do come together in Tanakh. The mastery of the 24 books of Tanakh it's just mind-boggling, incredible. A second example also in the same Prasha, in Kiseitzei. Someone told him, in the name of the Chidah, I believe, that when the Torah says men are not allowed to wear women's clothing and women are not allowed to wear men's clothing, the Chidah talks about whether that's true about men having a woman's name or a woman having a man's name. Is that asur? Reb Chaim makes a list of 38 times that we find the same name for a man and a woman. Some are in Tanakh, and some are in Tana Devei Eliyahu. I think one is in the Hagdamah of Sefer Ozarua. The imagination can't grasp how a person could have such a mastery of everything he studies to be able to make that type of a calculation. Reb Chaim wrote books. He wrote svarim on parts of Torah that are not halacha l'maisa. He has a whole book on the rules of Egla Arufa. The Egla Arufa is never going to be brought. It's not halacha l'maisa, and he has a thick sefer on it. It's just incredible. And Rav Chaim was so beloved to Klal Yisrael. Beloved. The people who print the newspapers tell me that since he passed away, they're getting emails. Everyone wants his picture together with Rav Chaim to be in the newspaper. They don't have to ask for pictures. Everyone's saying, the rabbis are sending pictures. The ordinary people are sending pictures. The guys are sending, the Bachurim. Very beloved. The Gemara says that those that were there, Bashkafta the Rebbe, when Rabbeinu HaKadosh died, whoever was in the room, Muchan l'chayei olam haba. It's a schus, he goes to olam haba. Now, there's no free olam haba. Because you were in the right place in the right time, you don't get olam haba for that. It has to make an impression on you. The Gemara is telling us, those that were there when Rebbe died, their lives were never the same. They became people Muchan l'chayei olam haba. Reb Chaim was on the other side of the ocean, in Bnei Brak, and his long arm as the Nasi, the Gadol Yisroel, reached here. I want to tell you some of the Torah, not so much the stories, but the dinim, the Torah, the influence. I once had one of the doctors that davens in my shul told me that he had a sheila. He realizes that he's doing tattoos all the time. As you know, Jews are forbidden from having a tattoo on their body. He said, I just realized I do tattoos. I told him, you check the colon, you don't check tattoos. He said, no, I just realized whenever I do a colonoscopy involves sticking a tool with a camera up the person's body and looking for some type of disease. He said when he goes into the body and he sees a growth or a tumor, that machine allows him to tattoo a circle around the tumor so that later when the surgeon does surgery, he knows what to cut out. He told me it's literally a tattoo, the same ink, the same process. He says, are you allowed to do a tattoo in the colon? I say to myself, I've heard of all kinds of sheilot. This is a new one. The laws of tattoos in Yeridea are less than one side of a page. I've learned it many times. It doesn't have this question. And then I remembered. Reb Chaim has a sefer called Pashegen Aksav on the laws of tattooing. I said, I bet you it's there. Sure enough, I open it up. He has a chapter, a perek, on Ketovat Kaka Bipnim Haguf. And he makes a diuk in the Rambam. The Rambam says tattoos are osir in the whole body, both in the part of the body that's exposed and in the part of the body that's covered by clothing. So he makes a diuk. He makes other diukim as well and other proofs that inside the body there's no isur. When Reb Chaim did that, he didn't do it so that a rabbi in Flatbush will know what to do. Halacha l'maaseh. He did it because he learned the Torah lishma. He learned it for the sake of the Torah, to know the halacha, to have a biur in the kavanah of the Torah. That was his sole motivation in his learning. Reb Chaim has to reach across the ocean and reach you, each of us. From the lessons of things that he said and that he taught and that he did, it's got to reach into your life. I'll tell you how it reached into mine. One Motzei Shabbat, I was invited to speak. There was an out-of-town yeshiva that had a Malav Malka for the graduates that live in Brooklyn. I was invited to speak. On Motzei Shabbat, I give my own shiur here in the neighborhood. And afterwards, I ran over there. And I got up. You know what I said? I told them that Motzei Shabbat is a mitzvah to have Malav Malka. To have a Sudah for Motzei Shabbat. I run out to give a shiur. I'm busy. You're yotzei with mizonot. You could be yotzei with other things. it wasn't my practice to wash v'hamotzi. Somebody told me that Reb Chaim told him that when a person comes to Shamayim and they have the big scales, the mitzvot and the other stuff, that people realize we're not perfect. Some things we do wrong. But people are going to see the value of washing for hamotzi, for malav malka, and they're going to wonder, what a fool I was. Why didn't I do that? And when I heard that Reb Chaim said that, this goes back 15 years ago, approximately, since then I've washed every Motzai Shabbat. Bli neder. Every Motzai Shabbat. And when I got up to speak, I mentioned that. I know boys are busy and not everybody washes. I mentioned it. And then I sat down. The Rosh Yeshiva of that yeshiva whispers to me, I heard the same thing in the name of Reb Chaim, and I also wash every single week since I heard that story. That's a gadol b'Yisrael. Across the ocean, not to the people who he intended it for necessarily, reaches across the ocean and has influence because Klal Yisrael is willing to learn from the Nisiyei Yisrael, from the Gedolei Yisrael. Tell you another thing. I'm from the old school. I don't like wine. I've been making kiddush on grape juice since I got married. They published segulot for Reb Chaim. Reb Chaim's segulot are not the nutty ones, the ones that don't make sense. They're all halacha things. And one of them he wrote is to make kiddush lechatchila on yayin. And when I saw that, I started to make kiddush only on wine. And I've done it ever since. And my little grandchildren say, no grape juice in the house. There always used to be grape juice. Reb Chaim. Reb Chaim can reach across the ocean and influence people, influence their lives. Should I tell you the Segula of Reb Chaim? I have a friend who was diagnosed, they found cancer in his lungs. And he went to Reb Chaim. Reb Chaim, he said, what should I do? He said, learn Hilchot Treifot, the halachas of the lungs of an animal, what make it a treifa and what doesn't. It's not a part of halacha that people usually learn. And he did it. He sat down, Hilchas Hareya, he learned in Yeridea. Baruch Hashem, he's fine. But the point is that Reb Chaim's skula was to study Torah. I know someone had a problem with his legs. He said, learn Hilchot Regel B'Regel. Learn the laws of the holiday, every holiday. Regel B'Regel. Some of you needed a shidduch. He told them, learn Masechet Kiddushin. So he went back and he told him, I finished Kiddushin, still no shidduch. He said, did you do Yerushalmi Kiddushin? So he finished Yerushalmi Kiddushin. He went back and said, I finished Yerushalmi, still no shidduch. He said, did you learn Shulchan Aruch, Hilchat Kiddushin? He's in the middle of it now. I'll let you know the end of the story. But these are the segulot of Reb Chaim. Torah, mitzvot, to do mitzvot the right way, lechatchila. In Reb Chaim's world, you do a mitzvah the way it's supposed to be done, lechatchila. You and I, we're never going to reach a point where we can think of a combination of letters to get Kol HaTorah Kula, even in one parsha. If the letters come together, we're not holding there. And I don't know about you, I can't figure out names in Divrei Hayamim that are men's and women's. I can't handle that. But the things that Reb Chaim pushed on people like me and you, the things he encouraged us to do, from that we can learn. And the door's going to close. Pretty soon, the life of Chaim Kanievsky is going to be the history of Klal Yisrael, like all the Gedolei Yisrael, the legendary Gedolei Yisrael. Kol shohoya b'ashkafta de Rebbe muchan la'olam haba. We are in the generation, we can be influenced, there are going to be plenty of stories, there are going to be plenty of things to hear. Grab one of them, grab a little piece, grab your connection to Reb Chaim. Take one of the mitzvot and that Reb Chaim encouraged everyone to do in the Ofan HaMehudar, in the best way. And try to grab it, try to do it. I want to tell you a story. In the middle 90s, when the dot-com people were getting rich overnight, there was a couple, a young couple here in Flatbush. A man became a multimillionaire overnight, literally. In 6 months, he went from a little guy to having tens of millions of dollars. And he went to Eretz Yisrael, he went to Reb Chaim. And he told Reb Chaim he's worried for Ayin Hara. He davens in the same shul with all his friends. He lives on the block with all his friends. And suddenly he's got, $80, $90 million. He's worried they're all going to be jealous of him. It's going to be Ayin Hara. What should I do? So Reb Chaim said to him, so you quit your job, you're learning in the kollel in the morning? He said, no. Matter of fact, I'm busier than ever. I can't quit my job now. So he said to him, well, do you have more chavrutot over the day, over the night? He said, more chavrutot, I can barely keep up with the ones I had. So Reb Chaim looks at him and says, so why would anybody be jealous of you? He meant it. Because he looked at the world the way the world is. As we hear stories of a Gadol B'Yisrael, as we hear the advice of a Gadol B'Yisrael, we got to make sure it applies to us. We have to take a little bit of it with us. The long arm of Reb Chaim, it's touching people all over the world. Don't let the moment pass. Let it touch you a little bit. Over this Shabbat, all of the Jewish magazines and the newspapers, they're going to have stories people have of being by Reb Chaim. There's something there for you. Find it. Find something for you that you can do from today for decades, for the rest of your lives. I had this chus to be by Rav Moshe Feinstein. My grandparents lived in his building. He passed away 36 years ago. Yeah, and I was not a talmid of his. I was a young man. I used to go to his house sometimes to help minyan in the house. But I took little things from him that 36 years later I'm still doing. Grab something from all the stories you hear from Reb Chaim, all the Hagot Tovot. Take something, let something stick with you. Now, be zoche to have a piece of that Muchan L'chayei Olam Haba. Yehei Zichro Baruch.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.